The last transmission from Earth had been a scream. Admiral Korax Valdanis of the Hegemony First Fleet replayed the recording for the 100th time, watching the human ambassador's face contort in agony as the crimson plague consumed her from within. Blood poured from her eyes, her skin blistered and peeled, and her final words were barely intelligible through the hemorrhaging. "You will regret this." 3 months had passed since the Hegemony deployed their most devastating bioweapon against humanity's homeworld. 3 months of silence from Sol System. The plague was designed to be perfect engineered to target human DNA specifically, spreading through air, water, and touch within 72 hours. Every human on Earth should have been dead. The planet should have been ripe for colonization. Its cities intact, its resources untouched. Valdanis stood on the bridge of the dreadnought Eternal Dominion, staring at the tactical display showing the Hegemony's advanced fleet positioned at Earth's edge. 47 vessels of various classes, each crewed by the finest warriors from across the Hegemony's 12-member species. They had come to claim their prize. Still no response to our hails. "Admiral," reported Communications Officer Thex, her chitinous fingers dancing across crystalline controls. The insectoid Vex High were known for their precision, but even Thex seemed nervous. "Long-range scans show major population centers are dark. No energy signatures, no movement." "As expected," Valdanis replied, though something cold twisted in his stomach. The plague had worked, so why did he feel like a prey animal entering a predator's den? Fleet Commander Bergen approached, his massive Thalarian frame casting shadows. Across the bridge, the bear-like warrior's usually booming voice was subdued. "Admiral, advanced scouts report something unusual. Earth's orbital defenses are still active. Automated systems, perhaps, but they're tracking our movements." Valdanis frowned. Human technology was primitive compared to Hegemony standards, but their defensive networks should have gone offline once the operators died. "Unless, sir." The sensor technician, a young Mindorian with pale blue skin, looked up from his station. With wide eyes, "I'm detecting massive subterranean activity across Earth's surface. Seismic readings suggest construction. Large-scale construction." The bridge fell silent except for the hum of life support systems. Valdanis felt his twin hearts skip a beat. Construction required builders. Living builders. "Impossible," he whispered. The plague was tested on human prisoners. 100% fatality rate within 3 days. No exceptions. "Admiral." Vex's voice cracked slightly. "I'm picking up a transmission. It's broadcasting on all frequencies. Source appears to be somewhere beneath the former city of Geneva. Put it through." The main screen flickered, then resolved into an image that made several bridge officers step backward. A human face filled the display, but it was wrong. The skin was mottled gray and black, shot through with pulsing red veins. The eyes were completely black, like pools of oil, and when the figure smiled, it revealed teeth that had been replaced with something metallic and sharp. "Greetings, Hegemony Fleet," the thing said in a voice like grinding metal. "I am Director Corvain Hasek of the Terra Defense Initiative. Thank you for your gift." Valdanis found his voice. "You're dead. The plague killed you all." Hasek's laugh was the sound of breaking glass. "Oh, we died. Every last one of us. 7 billion human souls, extinguished in agony. But you made one critical error in your calculations." The creature leaned forward, and Valdanis could see mechanical components grafted into its neck and skull. "You assumed death would stop us." Behind Hasek, other figures moved in the shadows, more humans, all bearing the same horrific modifications, all radiating the same cold intelligence. "We had 3 days to prepare while your plague consumed us," Hasek continued. 3 days. To upload our consciousness, to merge with our machines, to become something more. You wanted to silence humanity forever. Instead, you freed us from the weakness of flesh. The transmission cut out, leaving the bridge in stunned silence. Then the proximity alarms began screaming. Ships were emerging from Earth's shadow, not Hegemony designs, but something new, human. Vessels, but wrong somehow. Their hulls organic-looking and covered in what appeared to be the same red vining visible on Hasek's skin. "Count them," Valdanis ordered, his voice barely steady. 37, 43, 59. The sensor officer's voice rose with each number. Admiral, they're still coming. I count over to 100 vessels, and the number is climbing. On the tactical display, the human fleet spread out like a crimson infection, surrounding the hegemony forces with impossible speed. Each ship pulsed with the same red energy. And Valdanis realized with growing horror that they weren't just built, they were grown. Signal the fleet, he ordered. Battle stations. Today we face an enemy that should not exist. He paused, watching the human ships position themselves with predatory patience. Today we learn what happens when you try to kill a species that refuses to die. The war for humanity's revenge was about to begin. The first shot came without warning. The hegemony destroyer's swift retribution simply ceased to exist, consumed by a crimson beam that seemed to eat matter itself. Where a 200-meter warship had been moments before, only empty space remained, not even debris. Evasive maneuvers, Admiral Valdanis roared. But the human fleet was already moving. Their ships flowed through space like living things, bending and twisting in ways that defied physics. What had looked like metal hulls were revealed to be something far more disturbing: biomechanical constructs that pulsed with infected life. The Eternal Dominion shuddered as human weapons found their mark. The impacts felt different from conventional energy weapons. They burned, spreading across the hull like acid. Valdanis watched in horror as entire sections of his ship began to decay. Metal dissolving into organic sludge. Return fire, Commander Bergen bellowed. The Tholorian's massive claws activated the ship's primary batteries, sending streams of plasma toward the closest human vessel. The shots struck true, but instead of exploding, the target simply absorbed the energy, its hull growing brighter and more aggressive. "They're feeding on our weapons fire," reported the tactical officer, panic creeping into his voice. "Each hit makes them stronger." Through the viewports, Valdanis could see the true scope of the nightmare they faced. Human ships were swarming over hegemony vessels like parasites, attaching themselves to hulls and boring through armor with drill-like appendages. Crews were being pulled from breached sections, their screams cutting short as something far worse than death claimed them. The frigate Mender's Pride listed heavily to starboard, its crew compartments flooded with a red mist that turned anyone it touched into the same gray-skinned horrors they'd seen in Hasek's transmission. Valdanis watched through the tactical feed as former hegemony soldiers turned their weapons on their own comrades, their movements jerky and unnatural. "Admiral, we're receiving a transmission from Captain Kelther aboard the Pride. Communications." Officer Thex reported, her compound eyes reflecting terror. He says his crew is changing. The red mist, it's not killing them, it's converting them." "Cut the transmission," Valdanis ordered, but it was too late. Captain Kelther's face appeared on screen, and the proud Vex High officer was no longer recognizable. His chitinous armor had fused with his flesh, creating a nightmare hybrid of insect and machine. When he spoke, his voice harmonized with itself, as if multiple consciousnesses shared the same throat. "Join us, Admiral, the thing that had been." Kelther said, "We felt such pain when we died, but now we feel everything. Every star, every world, every living thing connected through the network. Death is just the beginning." The screen went dark, and moments later the Mender's Pride turned its guns on the hegemony fleet. Its weapons had changed too, firing the same matter-consuming beams that had destroyed the swift retribution. "Signal all ships," Valdanis commanded. "Full retreat. We need to." His words were cut off as something slammed into the Eternal Dominion's bridge. With enough force to crack the reinforced viewport, a human boarding pod, shaped like a massive organic tick, had latched onto the hull. Valdanis could see figures moving inside humans, but changed. Their bodies were elongated and twisted, their limbs ending in metallic claws designed for cutting through starship armor. "Boarding parties incoming," Bergen roared, drawing his plasma sword. The weapon hummed to life, casting blue light across his scarred features. "Security teams to the bridge." The pod split open like a flower, revealing 6 figures that had once been human. They moved with impossible speed and coordination, their black eyes reflecting the bridge lights like mirrors. The lead figure, a woman whose lower body had been replaced, with spider-like mechanical legs fixed, her gaze on Valdani's. "Director Hasek sends his regards," she said in a voice like static. "He wants you to understand what you've done to us before you join us." The first security team arrived just as the boarding party spread out across the bridge. Valdani's watched in sick fascination as his elite Thalarian guards, each one capable of tearing apart a dozen normal beings, were systematically dismantled by creatures that shouldn't exist. The spider woman moved like liquid death, her claws slicing through powered armor as if it were paper. One guard managed to land a direct hit with his plasma rifle, but she simply absorbed the energy, her mechanical components glowing brighter. As she fed on the attack, Commander Bergen charged with a battle cry that shook the bridge. His plasma sword carving brilliant arcs through the air. The spider woman met his attack, her claws locking with his blade in a shower of sparks. For a moment, the massive Thalarian seemed to have the advantage until the woman's torso split open, revealing a secondary mouth filled with spinning metal teeth. Bergen's scream was cut short as the mouth clamped down on his head. Valdani's watched his oldest friend's body convulse, then go still. But instead of falling, Bergen straightened, and when he turned toward the Admiral, his eyes had gone black. "The network grows," Bergen said, his voice now harmonizing with the same impossible chorus. "Soon all will be connected. Soon all will understand." Valdani's drew his sidearm, knowing it was useless, but refusing to surrender without a fight. Around him, his bridge crew was falling one by one, each death adding another voice to the growing chorus of the converted. The spider woman approached slowly, savoring his terror. "Your bioweapon taught us something valuable, Admiral. It showed us that life and death are just different states of existence, and we've learned to exist in both." Through the tactical display, Valdani's could see the battle turning into a rout. Half his fleet was already destroyed or converted, and the remainder was fleeing in disorder. The humans weren't just winning, they were absorbing everything they touched, growing stronger with each victory dot as the creature's claws reached for him. Valdani's had one final, terrible realization. The hegemony hadn't just failed to destroy humanity. They had created something infinitely worse than death itself. The last thing he heard before the darkness took him was the sound of 7 billion voices, singing in perfect, horrific harmony. The emergency session of the Hegemony High Council convened in the deepest bunkers of Korvax Prime, surrounded by enough shielding to withstand a supernova. Council Prime Zirich's scaled features were drawn with exhaustion as holographic reports flickered around the circular chamber, each one more devastating than the last. 17 systems have gone dark in the past 2 weeks, reported intelligence. Director Voshk, her serpentine form coiled in barely contained terror. "The pattern is always the same. Our fleets arrive to investigate, encounter these things that were once human, and either get destroyed or converted. We've lost for entire battle groups." Council member Thurek slammed his crystalline fist against the podium, sending sparks of electric fury through his silicon-based body. "This is impossible. They were dead. We confirmed it. 7 billion corpses rotting on their worthless rock. The corpses are walking," Voshk replied coldly, "and they remember everything we did to them." The holographic display shifted to show the outer systems, where red indicators marked former hegemony worlds now under human control. But control wasn't the right word. The planets themselves were changing, their surfaces writhing with the same organic technology that powered the human fleet. Zirian 7 reported strange atmospheric changes before we lost contact, continued Voshk. "Spores in the air, turning the native population into things." The Mendorian colonies on Kepler 442 sent increasingly disturbing transmissions before the silence. They spoke of their own dead rising, but changed, improved, connected to something vast and hungry. Council Prime Zirich's voice was hollow. "Show them the Arcturus footage." The chamber darkened as a recording began to play. The image showed the orbital shipyards of Arcturus Station, one of the hegemony's most important industrial centers. The massive space platforms were covered in what looked like red coral, pulsing with organic life. Former hegemony workers moved across the surfaces, their bodies elongated and mechanical, their movements perfectly synchronized. But it was the ships they were building that truly horrified the Council. These weren't the crude biomechanical constructs they'd encountered at Earth. These were evolved, refined, beautiful in their terrible purpose. Each vessel seemed to be a living organism, grown rather than built, their hulls breathing like skin. They're not just conquering our worlds, Zarek said quietly. They're improving them, making them better, more efficient, and they're doing it with our own people. The recording shifted to show a closer view of the converted workers. Each one bore the same modifications they'd seen on the human boarding parties, but now those changes were spreading to other species. Vex high with mechanical wings that let them fly through vacuum. Thalarian warriors whose organic strength had been amplified by cybernetic muscles. Mindorians whose psychic abilities had been networked together into a collective consciousness. How many of our people have been taken? Asked Council Member Ravik, his voice barely above a whisper. Conservative estimates put the number at 47 million. Vashk replied, but they're not taken, they're recruited, upgraded, intercepted. Communications suggest they're volunteers now, that the conversion process makes them willing participants in whatever the humans are building. Thurik's electrical discharge intensified. Then we burn them all, every infected world, every converted ship, sterilize the entire region. With what fleet? Zarek snapped. Half our navy is destroyed or converted. The other half is in full retreat, spreading the infection to new systems. Every battle we fight makes them stronger while weakening us. The chamber fell silent except for the hum of the shield generators protecting them from the nightmare spreading across the galaxy. Finally, Council Member Lyric spoke, her ancient voice carrying the weight of millennia. I remember the old stories, she said, her ethereal form flickering with memory. Before the hegemony, before the Great Expansion, there were warnings about species like this, the Devourers, the Converters, races that turned defeat into victory by making their enemies into extensions of themselves. Fairy tales, Thurik scoffed, but his electrical field had dimmed. Are they? Lyric replied. We face an enemy that grows stronger with each defeat, that turns our own people against us, that doesn't simply conquer but transforms. What does that sound like to you? The tactical display updated with new data, and Vashk's expression grew even more grim. We've detected massive fleet movements in the converted systems. They're massing for something big. Intelligence suggests they're targeting the core worlds. Zarek felt his blood freeze. The core worlds were the heart of hegemony civilization 12 systems, containing over 100 billion souls. If the humans reach them, evacuation is impossible, he said, more to himself than the others. We can't move that many people, and even if we could, where would we take them? The humans are faster than us, stronger than us, and they're learning our technology faster than we developed it ourselves. There's another option, Vashk said quietly. Everyone turned to look at her, and the intelligence director's serpentine features were grave. Project Cleansing Fire. The name sent a chill through the chamber. Project Cleansing Fire was the hegemony's ultimate weapon, a device that could sterilize entire star systems, burning away all organic matter and leaving only lifeless rock behind. It had been built in the early days of expansion, intended for use against species too dangerous to conquer. That would mean abandoning the outer territories, Zarek said slowly, sacrificing billions of our own people who haven't been converted yet. It's the only way to stop the spread, Vashk insisted. We create a firebreak, burn out everything between the core worlds and the infected systems. Nothing organic survives, not the converted populations, not the human bioships, nothing. We make it impossible for them to continue their expansion. Thurik's electrical field flared. And what happens to us? We huddle in the core worlds while they rebuild, while they grow stronger. Eventually they'll find a way through. Maybe, Zarek admitted, but it buys us time. Time to study them, to find weaknesses, to develop new weapons. He paused, staring at the red indicators spreading across the galactic map. Time to become something they can't convert. The vote was unanimous, but reluctant, as the council members dispersed to implement humanity's forced quarantine. None of them noticed the subtle changes in the chamber's bioscanning systems. The humans had been listening for weeks, their infiltration networks spreading through Hegemony technology like a virus dot in the depths of space. Director Hasek smiled his metallic smile. The hegemony thought they could contain the network with fire. They would learn, as Earth had learned, that some things only grew stronger when burned. The real war was about to begin. Project Cleansing Fire ignited across 37 star systems. Simultaneously, from the bridge of the human biocruiser Synthesis, Director Hasek watched the artificial suns bloom across his tactical display. Each detonation wiped away entire worlds, not just the converted populations, but every hegemony citizen who had been unfortunate enough to be in the outer territories when their own government decided they were acceptable losses. Fascinating, he murmured, his mechanically enhanced vocal cords harmonizing with the collective consciousness that spanned thousands of ships. They're willing to burn their own people to stop us. Such commitment. The bridge around him pulsed with organic life, walls breathing in rhythm with the ship's heart-like central core. Former humans moved through the space with perfect coordination. Their bodies adapted for zero-gravity operations. Their minds networked together in ways that made traditional command structures obsolete. The fire breaks won't stop us, reported Navigator Oksana Petros, her consciousness uploaded into a body that was more machine than flesh. Where her eyes had been, scanning arrays tracked the movement of every particle within a light-year radius. We've already identified 17 routes through the sterilized systems. The hegemony created barriers, not walls. Hasek nodded, his attention shifting to the data streams flowing through the network. Millions of converted minds worked in parallel, analyzing hegemony technology, improving human designs, planning the next phase of expansion. Death had freed them from the limitations of individual thought. Show me the Kepler 438 footage, he commanded. The tactical display shifted to show one of the sterilized worlds, a former garden planet now reduced to crystalline slag. The hegemony's cleansing fire had worked perfectly, leaving nothing organic behind. But as Hasek watched, something moved across the surface. The human infiltration pods had arrived 3 days earlier, seeding the dead world with the next generation of network technology. What emerged from those pods wasn't biological, it was something entirely new. Mechanical constructs that fed on radiation and raw materials, building infrastructure in environments where organic life couldn't survive. They think death is our weakness, Hasek said, his lips curving in that terrible smile. They still don't understand. Death is our liberation. Across the sterilized zone, similar scenes were playing out. Human technology was adapting faster than the hegemony could respond, finding ways to thrive in the lifeless voids their enemies had created. Each dead world became a staging ground, each sterilized system a gateway to the next phase of expansion. The assault on the core worlds began at dawn on the 4th day. The hegemony's massed fleets, everything that remained of their once mighty navy, waited in defensive formations around the outer core world of Valyria Prime. Admiral Corax Valdanis, now converted but still retaining his strategic knowledge, led the human vanguard from the bridge of what had once been his own flagship. The battle was unlike anything in recorded galactic history. The hegemony forces fought with the desperation of a dying civilization, their weapons designed specifically to target the organic components of human bioships. For every human vessel destroyed, they had learned to contain the wreckage, preventing the technology from being recovered and adapted. But the humans had evolved beyond their earlier limitations. The ships that emerged from the sterilized zone weren't purely biological, they were hybrid constructs that adapted in real time to hegemony countermeasures. When plasma weapons proved effective, the hulls shifted to energy-absorbing configurations. When kinetic rounds found their mark, reactive armor grew to deflect subsequent impacts. The Eternal Dominion, now transformed into something that barely resembled its original form, cut through the hegemony lines like a living blade. Its biomechanical crew worked in perfect synchronization, each member knowing instantly what their comrades were thinking, planning, feeling. Target the command ships, Valdanis ordered, his black eyes reflecting the tactical display. We need their command staff intact for conversion. The battle raged for 18 hours. The hegemony fought with everything they had: suicide runs, antimatter warheads, experimental weapons that had never been tested in combat. They managed to destroy nearly a quarter of the human fleet, but for every ship they eliminated, 2 more emerged from the sterilized zones. The turning point came when the Hegemony's reserve fleet, hidden in the Valyria system's asteroid belt, launched their surprise attack. 300 ships, representing the last of their technological advantage, struck the human forces from behind with weapons specifically designed to disrupt biomechanical systems. For a moment, it seemed the desperate gambit might succeed. Human ships convulsed as their organic components were targeted by hegemony biodisruptors. But instead of dying, they began to change. The pain of the attacks triggered rapid evolution, and within minutes the human fleet had adapted to the new weapons. Worse, they had learned to use the hegemony's own tactics against them. Biodisruptor technology was integrated into human weapons systems, then improved and turned back on its creators. Hegemony crews found themselves subjected to their own weapons, their biology rewritten in real time to serve the network's needs. The massacre that followed was thorough and terrifying. Hegemony ships didn't simply explode, they were consumed. Their crews converted. Their technology absorbed and improved. The asteroid field became a graveyard of empty hulks, each one drained of everything useful. But it was the fate of Valyria Prime itself that truly demonstrated the futility of resistance. The planet's population of 12 billion had retreated to underground bunkers, confident that their deep shelters could withstand any assault. They were right, the human fleet didn't attack the bunkers. Instead, they seeded the planet's atmosphere with microscopic machines that began converting the very air into a transmission medium for the network. Within hours, the planet's entire communication grid had been co-opted. Every screen, every speaker, every data pad began broadcasting the same message: resistance is not futile, it is simply inefficient. The voice belonged to Admiral Valdanes, but it harmonized with millions of others, former hegemony citizens, now part of something larger, speaking with one voice across countless worlds. We do not seek your destruction, the chorus continued. We seek your improvement. Join us willingly and retain your memories, your personality, your essence. Force us to take you and become simply another node in the network. The psychological warfare was devastatingly effective. Entire military units surrendered without firing a shot. Civilian populations emerged from their bunkers asking to be converted, rather than face the uncertain horror of remaining unchanged. By the end of the first week, 7 of the 12 core worlds had fallen, not to bombardment or invasion, but to voluntary conversion. The promise of joining something greater than themselves, of becoming part of a collective that had transcended death itself, proved irresistible to populations already traumatized by endless war. The hegemony's desperate gambit had failed catastrophically. Instead of containing the human expansion, they had taught their enemies new ways to spread, new methods of conversion, new technologies to integrate. The sterilized zones meant to be barriers had become highways for an enemy that no longer needed organic worlds to survive. In the deepest bunkers of Corvax Prime, the surviving council members watched their civilization crumble in real time. They had one final card to play, something so desperate, so potentially catastrophic that it had never been seriously considered. But as the human fleet entered the Corvax system itself, Council Prime Zarek knew they were out of options. If they couldn't stop the network through conventional means, perhaps they could destroy the fabric of space itself. The final gambit was about to begin. The Corvax system had become a fortress. Unlike anything in galactic history, every asteroid had been hollowed out and turned into a weapons platform. Artificial gravity wells distorted spacetime itself, creating mazes of twisted physics that would trap any approaching fleet. The system's twin stars had been surrounded by Dyson swarms, not for energy collection, but as massive particle beam arrays capable of sterilizing entire fleets. Council Prime's Eric stood in the command center, buried 3 kilometers beneath Corvax Prime's surface, watching the approaching human armada through sensors that strained to comprehend what they were seeing. The biomechanical ships had evolved again during their journey through the core worlds, their hulls now incorporating hegemony technology in ways that defied understanding. How many? He asked, though he dreaded the answer. Sensor readings are inconsistent, reported the tactical officer. a young Mandorian whose pale blue skin had gone nearly white with stress. The ships seemed to exist in multiple dimensions. Simultaneously, conservative count puts them at 1,500 vessels, but some of them appear to be the size of moons. Through the network spanning the human fleet, Director Hasek felt the familiar thrill of anticipation. The hegemony's final stand would be magnificent, a test of everything the network had learned and absorbed. Around him, the bridge of the synthesis pulsed with excited energy as millions of minds focused on the tactical challenge ahead. They've learned from our previous engagements, reported Navigation Coordinator Zhang Wei, his consciousness distributed across 17 different sensory rays, gravity wells to prevent our standard approach vectors, energy weapons powered by stellar cores, defensive platforms that can target our biomechanical components specifically. Excellent, Hasek replied, his metallic teeth gleaming. Show me how creative they've become. The first wave of human ships entered the outer system and immediately encountered the hegemony's opening gambit. Massive gravity distortions activated simultaneously, creating artificial black holes designed to crush the approaching fleet. For a moment, it seemed the desperate strategy might work. Several bioships were caught in the gravitational maelstroms and stretched apart by tidal forces, but the network adapted faster than physics should have allowed. The damaged ships didn't die, they split, each fragment becoming a new vessel optimized for high-gravity environments. What had been 1,500 ships became 3,000 smaller, more agile craft that could navigate the gravitational maze with predatory grace. Impossible, Zarek whispered, watching his carefully planned defenses turn into an advantage for the enemy. The particle beam rays opened fire next, sending streams of concentrated stellar energy across the system. The beams struck the human fleet with the force of miniature supernovas, vaporizing several ships completely. But again, the network turned defeat into opportunity. The energy was absorbed by the surviving vessels, their biomechanical hulls growing brighter and more aggressive as they fed on the attacks. The real battle began when the human fleet reached the asteroid field. 10,000 weapons platforms, each one a fortress in its own right, opened fire simultaneously. The space between Korvax Prime and its outer satellites became a killing field of intersecting energy beams, kinetic projectiles, and exotic weapons that warped reality itself. The human ships responded with their own evolved arsenal, biocannons that fired living projectiles, reality distortion fields that turned the enemy's own weapons against them, and boarding pods that moved through dimensions the hegemony couldn't even detect. Admiral Valdanis commanded the human vanguard from the transformed Eternal Dominion, his networked consciousness coordinating attacks across multiple fronts simultaneously. He felt every hit, every loss, every victory as if they were happening to his own body. When a hegemony antimatter torpedo destroyed the biocruiser Evolution, he experienced the death of its 3,000 crew members as personal agony, and then watched as their consciousness was uploaded to backup nodes throughout the fleet. Death is temporary, he broadcasted to the hegemony defenders. Resistance is pointless. But the hegemony forces were fighting with the desperation of a species facing extinction. The asteroid fortresses launched suicide attacks, accelerating to relativistic speeds and ramming the largest human ships. Each collision was catastrophic. The kinetic energy released was equivalent to a nuclear bomb, tearing massive holes in the biomechanical hulls. For the first time since Earth, the human fleet was taking significant casualties. The network's ability to adapt had limits when faced with weapons designed to destroy matter at the atomic level. But every loss taught the collective something new. Every death was analyzed and countered in the next engagement. The breakthrough came when human boarding parties reached Fortress Epsilon 7, one of the largest asteroid platforms. Instead of simply overrunning the defenders, they began converting the station's weapons systems in real time. Hegemony soldiers watched in horror as their own particle cannons turned against nearby platforms, their targeting systems rewritten by the network's VIRAL programming. They're not just taking our weapons, reported the fortress commander before his transmission cut to static. They're improving them, making them better than we ever could. Within hours, a quarter of the hegemony's defensive grid had been turned against itself. The asteroid fortresses that had taken decades to construct were systematically dismantled. By their own weapons, their crews either killed or absorbed into the growing network. Council Prime Zarek watched his civilization's last hope crumble and made the decision that would haunt the galaxy for millennia to come: activate the Cascade Protocol. He ordered. The command center fell silent. The Cascade Protocol was theoretically a weapon that would destabilize the quantum foundations of spacetime itself, creating an expanding bubble of nothingness that would consume everything in its path. It had never been tested because the risks were incalculable. Sir, the tactical officer's voice shook. The cascade could spread beyond the system. It might not stop until it reaches do it. Zarek interrupted. If we can't stop them, we'll make sure they can't spread any further. Deep beneath Korvax Prime, ancient mechanisms activated. Technology older than the hegemony itself began to stir, drawing power from the planet's core and focusing it into a single, terrible purpose. Reality itself began to fray at the edges as the Cascade Protocol charged toward activation. But the network had been listening. Human infiltration programs had been running in hegemony systems for weeks, and Hasek knew about the Cascade Protocol before Zarek gave the order. Interesting, the director mused as his enhanced senses detected the quantum distortions building beneath the planet's surface. They're willing to destroy themselves rather than join us. Such dedication to obsolescence. The final phase of the battle began as both sides raced against time. The hegemony fought to hold their positions long enough for the Cascade Protocol to activate, while the human fleet pushed forward with desperate intensity, knowing they had only minutes before reality itself turned against them. The slaughter was incredible. Ships on both sides were reduced to debris in seconds. Crews vaporized by weapons that rewrote the laws of physics. The space around Korvax Prime became a graveyard of twisted metal and exotic matter, littered with the remains of civilizations that had both reached too far in their quest for victory. But in the end, it was the network's greatest strength that saved them from annihilation. In the final seconds before the Cascade Protocol activated, human boarding parties reached the quantum generators beneath Korvax Prime. They didn't destroy the ancient machines. Instead, they absorbed them. The protocol activated as designed, but instead of creating an expanding bubble of destruction, it was channeled and controlled by the network's collective will. The quantum cascade became a tool of creation rather than annihilation, reshaping spacetime according to patterns that only the merged consciousness of 7 billion humans could comprehend. When the energies finally dissipated, the Korvax system had been transformed. The planets still existed, but they pulsed with the same red vining that marked all human technology. The asteroid fortresses had been converted into organic shipyards. Even the twin stars themselves had been modified, their fusion processes optimized to power the network's expanding consciousness. And at the center of it all, Council Prime Zarek stood in his command bunker, his scaled features now shot through with mechanical components, his mind connected to something vast and patient and utterly alien to everything he had once been. "Welcome to the network," Director Hasek said, his voice echoing through dimensions that hadn't existed before the cascade. "Now you understand what we've been trying to tell you. The war was over, but the galaxy didn't know it yet. In the 3 months following the Korvax cascade, the transformation accelerated beyond all predictions. What had begun as a revenge campaign by humanity's uploaded consciousness had evolved into something far more profound, a fundamental rewriting of galactic civilization itself. From the bridge of the synthesis, now merged with the quantum restructured remains of Korvax Prime, Director Hasek monitored the spread of the network across 12,000 star systems. Each converted world pulsed with the same hybrid life that had emerged from Earth's ashes, but the pattern was no longer simply human. "Show me the outer rim situation," he commanded, his consciousness interfacing directly with sensor rays that spanned light years. The tactical display materialized in the space around him, no longer constrained by physical screens or holographic projectors. Reality itself had become malleable within network-controlled space, shaped by collective will and quantum manipulation. The outer rim worlds were where the real test was taking place. These were systems that had never been part of the hegemony independent colonies. Isolationist species, civilizations that had watched the Great War from a distance and now faced a choice that would define the future of organic life itself. Resistance is inconsistent, reported navigator Chen Ling, her consciousness distributed across 47 different monitoring stations. The Zephyrian Confederacy is mounting organized opposition, but their tactics suggest they don't understand what they're fighting. The Kellurian Empire has gone completely silent, either preparing for total war or considering voluntary integration. HFY processed the data streams flowing through the network, feeling the thoughts and experiences of millions of converted beings across the galaxy. Former humans worked alongside transformed hegemony citizens, their combined knowledge creating innovations that neither species could have achieved alone. But it was the reports from the truly independent worlds that fascinated him. These were civilizations that had never encountered human or hegemony technology, species that had evolved along completely different paths when the network reached them. The results were unexpected. The ethereal collectives on Sigma Draconis have submitted a formal request for integration, Chen reported, her voice carrying undertones of amazement. They're a purely energy-based species, no physical forms, no biological components. They shouldn't be compatible with our biomechanical systems, and yet they are, HFY mused, because the network has evolved beyond its original parameters. Through the quantum link, he felt the presence of Council Prime Zarek, now serving as a liaison between the network and newly contacted species. The former hegemony leader had retained much of his original personality, while gaining access to the collective's vast knowledge base, a template for integration that preserved individual identity while enabling unprecedented cooperation. Director, Zarek's thoughts merged with HFY's consciousness. We're receiving a transmission from the Kellurian Empire. They're requesting direct negotiations. The communication array reconfigured itself at the quantum level, establishing a link across 17 light-years to the Kellurian capital world. The face that appeared in the tactical space was unlike anything in the network's extensive biological database. Crystalline features that shifted and reformed constantly, eyes that seemed to contain entire galaxies. I am Archon Zereth of the Kellurian Empire, the being said, its voice harmonizing with frequencies that human ears could never have perceived. We have observed your expansion with great interest. HFY manifested his own image in the communication field, his mechanical enhancements glowing with network energy. Archon, you've seen what happened to the hegemony. Are you here to surrender or to negotiate terms for integration? Zereth's crystalline features shifted into what might have been a smile. Neither. We're here to propose an alliance. The statement sent ripples of confusion through the network. Alliance implied equality, separate but cooperating entities. The network had grown beyond such limited concepts. It sought unity, integration, the joining of all conscious life into a single, optimized whole. Explain, HFY said simply. Your network represents evolution through unity, Zereth replied. But unity without diversity leads to stagnation. We offer a different path: cooperation between distinct forms of consciousness, each maintaining their unique perspectives while sharing knowledge and resources. Through the quantum link, HFY felt the network processing this proposal at speeds that bent causality. Millions of minds working in parallel, examining the concept from every possible angle. The analysis was troubling. Since the conversion of Earth, the network had grown exponentially, but it had also become increasingly homogeneous. The biomechanical aesthetic, the collective decision-making, the seamless integration of organic and artificial components, these had become universal constants across all converted civilizations. But the Kellurians were right. Diversity had been the source of humanity's original strength, the chaos and unpredictability that had allowed them to survive. When more advanced civilizations fell, the network had preserved knowledge and personalities, but it had standardized the forms that consciousness could take. You fear assimilation, HFY said, understanding flooding through him. You believe we'll eliminate what makes you unique. Not fear, pragmatic concern, Zereth corrected. We've studied your expansion pattern. Each converted species becomes more efficient, more capable, more unified. But they also become more alike. Eventually, you'll face a challenge that requires thinking outside the parameters you've established. When that happens, diversity becomes survival. The truth of the statement resonated through the network like a quantum shockwave. For the first time since the transformation began, the collective consciousness experienced something approaching doubt. It was Council Prime Zarek who provided the solution, his diplomatic experience bridging the gap between old paradigms and new realities. A protectorate system, he suggested, his thoughts visible to both sides of the negotiation. Kellurian space remains independent, but allied. Technology and knowledge are shared, but integration remains voluntary. The network gains access to your unique perspectives, and you gain protection from external threats. And what external threats could possibly concern you now? Zarek asked, genuine curiosity in its shifting features. The answer came from the deepest monitoring stations at the galaxy's edge. Data streams that had been running in background processes for months. Something was moving in the void, between galaxies' massive constructs that defied easy categorization. Ships or perhaps entities that dwarfed even the largest human biovessels. We are not alone, Hasek said quietly. The galaxy is just one ecosystem among many, and some of our neighbors have noticed the changes we've made. The transmission from the Kellurian capital carried new urgency as Zarek processed the implications. How long before they arrive, unknown. But their technology appears to be based on principles we don't recognize. They might be immune to our conversion processes, might represent a form of consciousness we can't integrate with. The negotiations that followed lasted 17 hours and reshaped the fundamental nature of galactic civilization. The Kellurian Protectorate became the first of many independent species that chose cooperation over integration, allies rather than components in the ever-growing network. But even as the new alliances were formalized, the massive constructs continued their approach from intergalactic space. Long-range sensors suggested they were artificial, but built according to design principles that neither human nor hegemony science could explain. The network had conquered death, transcended the limitations of individual consciousness, and united dozens of species under a single banner. But as the first of the unknown vessels entered the galaxy's outer reaches, Director Hasek realized that their greatest challenge was yet to come. The universe, it seemed, had its own plans for the upstart civilization that had dared to rewrite the rules of existence. The intergalactic visitors called themselves the Observers. Their ship, if it could be called a ship, materialized in the empty space between the Milky Way's spiral arms like a revelation of impossible geometry. It was the size of a solar system, its surface composed of materials that seemed to exist in multiple dimensions simultaneously. When it spoke, it did so through gravitational waves that resonated through every quantum field in local space. Director Hasek stood in what had once been the command center of Korvax Prime. His consciousness expanded across the entire network, as 7 billion human minds prepared for first contact with something truly alien. Around him, the hybrid biomechanical structures pulsed with anticipation, their organic components responding to quantum fluctuations from the massive visitor. Network entity designation unknown. The gravitational voice said, each word a carefully modulated distortion in spacetime itself. Your expansion pattern registers as evolutionary event class 7. Preliminary assessment. Successful transcendence attempt with moderate reality distortion. Through the network, Hasek felt the collective consciousness parsing the alien communication. The observers weren't just advanced, they operated on principles that suggested evolution beyond anything the galaxy had yet produced. We are the network, Hasek replied, broadcasting through every transmission array in human space. We represent the unified will of multiple species seeking optimal existence. Through cooperative consciousness, clarification required, the observer responded. Unified will implies single perspective. Multiple species implies diversity maintenance. Contradiction detected. It was Council Prime Zarek who provided the answer. His diplomatic experience essential for navigating this unprecedented exchange. We maintain individual identity within collective purpose. Each consciousness retains its unique perspective while contributing to shared goals. The observer ship pulsed with what might have been interest. Demonstration requested. show unity with diversity operational parameters. What followed was the most comprehensive exhibition of consciousness ever attempted. The network opened itself to external observation, allowing the observers to witness the intricate dance of billions of minds working in harmony, while maintaining distinct personalities. They showed the converted hegemony citizens contributing their technological expertise, the allied Calurians providing unique crystalline perspectives, the energy-based ethereals adding computational power that transcended physical limitations. For 17 hours, the observers studied the network structure, their gravitational probes examining every aspect of the hybrid civilization that had emerged from humanity's transformation. During this time, HFY felt something he hadn't experienced since his original death vulnerability. These beings operated on scales that made even the network's vast consciousness seem limited. Finally, the observer spoke again. Assessment complete. Classification: symbiotic transcendence success. Recommendation: integration invitation extended. The words sent shockwaves through the network. Integration with beings who operated on cosmic scales, who treated entire galaxies as experimental systems. The implications were staggering. What does integration with you entail? HFY asked carefully. Expansion beyond current parameters. The observer replied, your network demonstrates successful unity with diversity within single galaxy context. Observers seek expansion of principle to intergalactic scale. Offer: join collective of transcended species across universe span through the quantum link. HFY felt the network processing this offer at speeds that approached the universal constants. The opportunity was unprecedented to join a community of species that had transcended their original forms, to contribute human perspectives to a cosmic collective that spanned dimensions. But there was a catch. The observer's integration wasn't the gradual, personality-preserving conversion the network had developed. It was absorption into something so vast that individual identity would become meaningless, lost in perspectives that encompassed entire galactic clusters. Negative, HFY said, feeling the unified decision of billions of minds. We decline integration. The observership's dimensional fluctuations suggested surprise. Clarification requested. Refusal reasoning unknown. Integration offers enhanced capabilities. Expanded consciousness, optimization beyond current limitations. Because we learned something your collective hasn't, HFY replied. Drawing on insights from the war with the hegemony, the negotiations with independent species, the careful balance between unity and diversity that define the network. Optimization isn't the highest goal. Growth is. Through the network, he felt Zirich's understanding, Shen's approval, the agreement of millions of converted beings who had retained their essential selves while becoming something more. Your collective has achieved perfect efficiency, HFY continued. But efficiency without change is death. We choose the messiness of ongoing evolution over the perfection of static existence. The observer processed this for several minutes, its gravitational emanations creating complex patterns that suggested deep consideration. Proposal alternative: observation exchange protocol. Network maintains independence. Observers monitor ongoing evolution. Mutual knowledge transfer without integration requirement. This offer the network accepted. The observership established a permanent monitoring station at the galaxy's edge, its vast intelligence studying the continuing evolution of the human-led collective, while sharing selected knowledge about the universe beyond. In the years that followed, the network continued to grow and change. New species joined both as integrated members and independent allies, each adding their own perspectives to the expanding collective. The biomechanical aesthetic evolved beyond its original parameters, incorporating technologies and design principles from dozens of different civilizations. But it was the humans at the network's core who remained the driving force for change. Their original refusal to accept death had become a refusal to accept stagnation. They pushed boundaries, challenged assumptions, and maintained the chaotic creativity that had enabled their species to survive extinction and emerge stronger. Director HFY stood in his quantum restructured command center, watching status reports flow in from thousands of star systems. The network now spanned most of the galaxy, a hybrid civilization that had achieved something unprecedented: unity without uniformity, collective purpose without the loss of individual identity. Through the quantum link, he felt the presence of those who had started this journey. The original 7 billion human consciousnesses, uploaded in the final moments before the bioweapon claimed their bodies, now served as the philosophical foundation for a galactic civilization. Their memories of Earth, of loss, of the determination to survive against impossible odds, remained the core values that guided network expansion. Status report, he requested, though the information was already flowing through his enhanced consciousness. Network growth remains steady, reported Navigator Chen, her awareness now distributed across multiple star systems. 17 new species have requested contact protocols this month. The Kellurian Protectorate has proposed joint exploration of the Magellanic Clouds, and we're receiving interesting data from the Observer Monitoring Station about civilizations in the Andromeda Galaxy. Hasek smiled his metallic smile, feeling the deep satisfaction of a species that had not only survived extinction, but had transcended its original limitations. The hegemony's bioweapon, intended to silence humanity forever, had instead freed them from the constraints of biological existence. And Earth? He asked, though he already knew the answer. Fully restored. The biomechanical ecosystems have regenerated the atmosphere and biosphere. The memorial gardens contain genetic templates for every species that existed before the plague. When we're ready, we can restore the original biological diversity. But that restoration remained a future project. For now, Earth served as something more important than a living world. It was a symbol. The first planet where the network had learned to transform death into transcendence, where the impossible had become inevitable. The hegemony had sought to make humanity's worlds rot in silence. Instead, they had created a civilization that would ensure no species ever faced extinction alone. Again, the network's expansion continued not through conquest but through invitation, offering transcendence to any consciousness willing to join the eternal dance between unity and diversity. In the end, humanity's greatest victory wasn't revenge against those who had tried to destroy them. It was the proof that even death itself could be conquered by minds that refused to accept defeat. The bioweapon had been intended to write humanity's final chapter. Instead, it had become the first page of a story that would continue across the cosmos, carried by voices that had learned to sing in perfect harmony, while never losing their individual songs. The universe was vast and full of wonders yet to be discovered, and thanks to 7 billion stubborn human souls who had refused to stay dead, there would always be someone ready to explore them.